Four fables from Italo Calvino, Numbers in the Dark. 1. Making Do. There was a town where everything was forbidden. Now, since the only thing that wasn't forbidden was the game Tip-Cat, the town's subjects used to assemble on meadows behind the town and spend the day there playing Tip-Cat. And as the laws forbidding things had been introduced one at a time, and always with good reason, no one found any cause for complaint or had any trouble getting used to them. Years passed. One day, the constables saw that there was no longer any reason why everything should be forbidden, and they sent messengers to inform their subjects that they could do whatever they wanted. The messengers went to those places where the subjects were wont to assemble.
Hear ye, they announced. Nothing is forbidden any more.
The people went on playing Tip-Cat.
Understand? The messengers insisted. You are free to do so what you want.
Good, replied the subjects. We're playing Tip-Cat. The messengers busily reminded them of the many wonderful and useful occupations they had once engaged in, and could now engage in once again. But the subjects wouldn't listen, and just went on playing, stroke after stroke, without even stopping for a breather. Seeing that their efforts were in vain, the messengers went to tell the constables. Easy, the constables said. Let's forbid the game of Tip-Cat. That was when the people rebelled and killed the lot of them. Then, without wasting time, they got back to playing Tip-Cat. 2. The Black Sheep. There was a country where they were all thieves. At night, everybody would leave home with skeleton keys and shaded lanterns and go and burgle a neighbor's house. They'd get back at dawn, loaded, to find their own house had been robbed. So everybody lived happily together. Nobody lost out, since each stole from the other, and that other from another again, and so on, until you get to a last person who stole from the first. Trade in the country inevitably involved cheating on the parts both of buyer and seller. The government was a criminal organization that stole from its subjects, and the subjects, for their part, were only interested in defrauding the government. Thus, life went on smoothly. Nobody was rich, and nobody was poor. One day, how we don't know, it so happened that an honest man came to live in the place. At night, instead of going out with his sack and lantern, he stayed home to smoke and read novels. The thieves came, saw the light on, and didn't go in. This went on for a while. Then they were obliged to explain to him that even if he wanted to live without doing anything, it was no reason to stop others from doing things. Every night he spent at home meant a family would have nothing to eat the following day. The honest man could hardly object to such reasoning. He took out to going out in the evening and coming back the following morning like they did, but he didn't steal. He was honest. There was nothing you could do about it. He went as far as the bridge and watched the water flow by beneath. When he got home, he found he had been robbed. In less than a week, the honest man found himself penniless. He had nothing to eat, and his house was empty. But this was hardly a problem, since it was his own fault. No, the problem was hardly that his behavior upset everything else, because he let the others steal everything he had without stealing anything from anybody. So there was always someone who got home at dawn to find their house untouched, the house he should have robbed. In any event, after a while, the ones that weren't being robbed found themselves richer than the others and didn't want to steal any more. To make matters worse, the ones who came to steal from the honest man's house found it was always empty, so they became poor. Meanwhile, the ones who had become rich got into the honest man's habit of going to the bridge at night to watch the water flow by beneath. This increased the confusion because it meant lots of others became rich and lots of others became poor. Now, the rich people saw that if they went to the bridge every night, they'd soon be poor, and they thought, let's pay some of the poor to go and rob for us. They made contracts, fixed salaries, percentages. They were still thieves, of course, and they tried still to swindle each other. But, as tends to happen, the rich got richer and richer, and the poor got poorer and poorer. Some of the rich people got so rich that they didn't need to steal or have others steal for them so as to stay rich. But if they stopped stealing, they would get poor because the poor stole from them. So they paid the very poorest of the poor to defend their property from the other poor, and that meant setting up a police force and building prisons. So it was that only a few years after the appearance of the honest man, people no longer spoke of robbing and being robbed, but only of the rich and the poor. But they were still all thieves. The only honest man had been the one at the beginning, and he died in very short order of hunger. Three. The man who shouted Teresa. I stepped off the pavement, walked backwards a few paces, looking up, and from the middle of the street, brought my hands to my mouth to make a megaphone and shouted towards the top of the stories of the block, "Teresa!" My shadow took fright at the moon and huddled between my feet. Someone walked by. Again I shouted, "Teresa!" The man came up to me and said, "If you don't shout louder, she won't hear you. Let's both try." So, count to 3. On 3 we shout together. And he said 1, 2, 3. And we both yelled, "Teresa!" A small group of friends passing by on their way back from the theatre or a cafe saw us calling out. They said, "Come on, we'll give you a shout too." And they joined us in the middle of the street, and the first man said 1, 2, 3, and then everybody shouted together, "Teresa!" Somebody else came by and joined us. A quarter of an hour later, there were a whole bunch of us, 20 almost, and every now and then somebody new came along. Organizing ourselves to give a good shout, all at the same time, wasn't easy. There was always someone who began before 3 or went too long, but in the end, we were managing something fairly efficient. We agreed that the te should be shouted low and long, the re high and long, and the sa low and short. It sounded great. Just a squabble every now and then when somebody was out. We were beginning to get it right when somebody, who, if his voice was anything to go by, must have had a very freckly face, asked, "But are you sure she's at home?" "Well, no," I said. "Well, that's bad," another said. "Forgotten your key, have you?" "Actually," I said, "I have my key." "So," they asked, "why don't you just go on up?" "Oh, but I don't live here," I answered. "I live on the other side of town." "Well, then excuse my curiosity," the one with the freckly voice asked carefully, "but who does live here?" "Well, I really wouldn't know," I said. People were a bit upset about this. "So, could you please explain," somebody with a very toothy voice asked, "why are you standing down here calling out Teresa?" "Well, as far as I'm concerned," I said, "we can call out another name or try something else. It's no big deal." The others were a bit annoyed. "I hope you weren't playing a trick on us," the freckly one asked suspiciously. "What?" I said resentfully, and I turned to the others for confirmation of my good faith. The others said nothing, indicating that they hadn't picked up the insinuation. "Look," somebody said good-naturedly, "why don't we call out Teresa one last time, and then we'll go home?" So we did it again. 1, 2, 3. "Teresa!" But it didn't come out very well. Then people headed off home, some one way, some the other. I'd already turned into the square when I thought I heard a voice still calling, "Teresa!" Someone must have stayed on to shout. Someone stubborn. 4. The Flash. It happened one day at a crossroads, in the middle of a crowd, people coming and going. I stopped, blinked. I understood nothing. Nothing about anything. I didn't understand the reasons for things or for people. It was all senseless, absurd, and I started to laugh. What I found strange at the time was that I'd never realized before. Up until then, I had accepted everything. Traffic lights, cars, posters, uniforms, monuments, things completely detached from any sense of the world. Accepted them as if there was some necessity, some chain of cause and effect that bound them together. Then the laugh died in my throat. I blushed, ashamed. I waved to get people's attention and, "Stop for a second," I shouted. "There's something wrong. Everything's wrong. We're doing the absurdest things. This can't be the right way. Where will it end?" People stopped around me, sized me up, curious. I stood there in the middle of them, waving my arms, desperate to explain myself, to have them share the flash of insight that had suddenly enlightened me, and I said nothing. I said nothing because the moment I'd raised my arms and opened my mouth, my great revelation had been as if it was swallowed up again, and the words had come out any old how, on impulse. So, people asked, "What do you mean?" Everything in its place, all is as it should be. Everything is a result of something else. Everything fits in with everything else. We can't see anything absurd or wrong. And I stood there, lost, because as I saw it now, everything had fallen into place again, and everything seemed natural. Traffic lights, monuments, uniforms, tower blocks, tram lines, beggars, processions. Yet this didn't calm me down. It tormented me. "I'm sorry," I answered. "Perhaps it was me that was wrong. It seemed that way. But everything's fine. I'm sorry." And I made off amid their angry glares. Yet, even now, every time, often, that I find I don't understand something, then, instinctively, I'm filled with the hope that perhaps this will be my moment again. Perhaps, once again, I shall understand nothing. I shall grasp that other knowledge, found and lost in an instant.